Hello and welcome to Drunk on Tea. Today I'm going to show you how to paint some desert camouflage for your models for Warhammer 40,000. Desert camo is a fantastic pattern that can really make your models stand out on the battlefield. I'm going to be basing my camouflage pattern off of the UK camo pattern. Although this pattern isn't used as much anymore, this classic design will look absolutely fantastic on the tabletop. So the first thing I've done is I've primed the model black, as this will give us a nice smooth, even base coat for the rest of our colours to work from. And the first colour I'm coming in with is Rawk Flesh. I'm going to paint this all over the uniform to this Imperial Guardsman. Now Rawk Flesh is quite a light colour, so it's going to take a couple of layers to build up to solid coverage over the black primer. But just take your time, slowly build up that coverage in a couple of layers until we get a nice smooth, even coat of Rawk Flesh all over the uniform to our Imperial Guardsman. Desert camo is often only two colours, a lighter and a darker, to break up the shape of a soldier. I'm going to have to mix it up ever so slightly on this model just so we still get an interesting effect that still reads like camouflage while making the model still readable as an Imperial Guardsman. I discussed this concept in an earlier video talking about camouflage, but for now I'm just making sure I coat all of that uniform with a couple of layers of Rawk Flesh. And after a couple of layers have been applied, you can see I've got a nice smooth, even base coat all over the Imperial Guardsman. So now I'm coming in with some Steel Legion Drab, and using this I'm going to apply the pattern all over the fabric. So what I want to do here is sort of apply some blotches and lines all over the uniform. Now I don't want to have these be a repetitive pattern. I don't want any sort of sequence to them. I want different shapes, different patterns all over the uniform. To get the most random patterns possible, I'm sort of stippling the paint on rather than just straight up painting it, as this helps create some more interesting shapes to the patterns that I'm painting onto the model. Obviously, if these shapes do become too repetitive or they're too blotchy or too large, you can paint back over them again with some Rawk Flesh. But by having them nice and random all over the uniform, we should get quite a nice desert camo pattern quite simply. Obviously, if some of these blotches are still a little bit see-through after the first coat, you can come back in and apply a second coat on top to make sure you get nice solid patterns all over the uniform. And after that Steel Legion Drab has been applied, you can see we've got a very messy pattern all over the uniform. Doesn't really look like camo at the moment, just looks like blotches. So I'm coming in with some Baylor Brown next. I'm going to add these as little sections around some of the brown we just applied. This is going to add that extra little bit of colour, break up that pattern a little bit, and this is what I find really sells this camouflage pattern at this scale on a miniature. So the traditional camo pattern is just the two colours, but by adding that third, it really helps sell this as a camo pattern rather than just a really messy, dirty, blotchy uniform. And with those patches of Baylor Brown applied, you can see we do kind of have that camo pattern now. So let's tie everything together and really make it stand out. So with some Agrax shade, which I'm thinning down with just a little bit of water, so it's a little bit less strong, I'm going to shade this all over the uniform. So this is going to tie all three of those colours together, give it a slightly more uniformed appearance, while also adding texture and definition into all of those recesses. So by thinning it down, this isn't quite as dark as it would be, so I'm just shading all over the uniform. And once that shade has dried, you can see how it has added that definition and tied all of those colours together. So now it's time for some subtle highlights. First highlights with some Rawk Flesh again. I'm just going to pick out some of the starkest points that didn't get painted over by any of the camo pattern, just catching these with an edge highlight of Rawk flesh. So I'm only going to be using the same colours that I used to apply the pattern, because I don't want this to be too stark or any of the highlights too sharp, but by reapplying some of those camo colours, we'll just add that little bit of definition and brightness, while still keeping within those 3 colours that we used before. So I'm just picking out any of the raised areas that didn't have any camo pattern painted over them and reapplying them with a thin edge highlight of Rawk flesh. This will just give a nice subtle highlight to some of these sharpest details. With the edge highlight of Rawk flesh applied, you can see how it's very subtly lightened up some of those areas at the edges of the fabric. So I'm going to do the same again with some Steel Legion drab. So wherever I've painted a Steel Legion drab spot, and it's on a crease or a fold or the edge of the fabric, any sort of raised details, I'm just applying a little bit of Steel Legion drab over those areas. So where the other parts got darkened down slightly by that Agrax Earth shade. This will brighten up those raised areas and give the impression of a highlight without being too stark, so it still keeps that sort of camouflaged look to the model. You can see here just the tops of folds and creases I'm just catching with a thin edge highlight of Steel Legion drab over those spots. And with that Steel Legion drab highlight applied, it's just one final highlight to apply to the uniform. That's going to be much like before with the Baylor Brown, just going to catch any raised spots where I've painted a Baylor Brown section. So the difficulty of camouflage is that in reality it's designed to break up shapes. And the last thing we want is for our models to just look like blotches on a tabletop. So you've got to mix that little bit of realism along with a little bit of stylized painting, so our models are still readable for what they are. So while you're playing your games, you'll still be able to read that this is an Imperial Guardsman who should look great on the tabletop. And with that Baylor Brown applied, that's the final highlight to the uniform. So now I'm going to paint the rest of the model, and I'll show you how to paint his armour. If you're enjoying the video, please press like. If you want more videos, press the subscribe button and ring the notification bell. And if you'd like to support the channel, please become a member by pressing the join button down below or joining me over on Patreon. Now I've painted the rest of the details on this Imperial Guardsman. All that's left to paint now is his armour to finish off that desert camo pattern. So for the armour, I'm coming in with Baylor Brown first. I'm going to apply this all over the armour panels and the helmet on the model. Obviously it's a nice bright colour again. This may take a couple of layers to build up to a solid coat, but to be nice and neat around the uniform we've already painted and highlighted, make sure you paint all of the armour with a couple of layers of Baylor Brown. By painting the armour also in a desert sort of style, we'll get a really great looking soldier that looks like he belongs on a desert world fighting battles for the Imperium. You can see I'm carefully picking out all the details to his helmet with Baylor Brown as well, but making sure I'm careful around all of the other details that I've painted. So I'm just making sure I catch all of the armour with a couple of layers of Baylor Brown. And after that armour has been painted with a couple of layers of Baylor Brown, you can see we've got a great looking sort of yellowy brown armour. So now I'm coming in with some Agrax Earth shade. I'm going to apply this as a pin shade around all of the raised details on the armour. So wherever there's an edge or a bit of texture, I'm applying this as a pin shade around that, so we get a bit of definition without darkening down the rest of our nice yellowy brown armour. So on the helmet there's quite a lot of detail, so I'm just carefully applying this pin shade into all of the details and around all of the texture. Make sure I catch all of the details on the helmet with a pin shade of Agrax Earth shade. If If you do come in a little bit too thick at any stage, you can tidy it back up with some Baylor brown, but just catch all of the armour with a pin shade. And after that pin shade has dried, you can see it's added some definition to the armour. So it's time to start highlighting. And the first highlight I'm coming in with is some Avalan Sunset. I'm going to apply this as an edge highlight, going around all of the raised details on the armour. So with the Avalan Sunset being just a slightly brighter yellowy colour than the Baylor brown for the base, this is going to give a nice edge highlight, give the impression of light catching off the edges of the armour without it being too stark as to make the model read as cartoonish or unrealistic. So it will keep in that theme of the desert camo pattern we painted on the uniform. So I'm just applying this edge highlight all the way around all of the details on the armour. So after this step, there is only one final highlight to apply. This is a really quick and easy armour method that really does look fantastic on your Imperial Guard soldiers. So I'm just making sure I carefully pick out all of the raised details on the helmet with an edge highlight of Avalan Sunset. If you do come in too thick, at any stage while you're applying this highlight, you can tidy it back up with a little bit of Baylor brown, but try and keep these highlights nice and thin. Just catch all of the raised details on the armour with some Avalan Sunset. With that Avalan Sunset highlight applied, you can see how it's given us a nice subtle edge highlight to all of that armour. So the final step is with some Dawn Yellow. Just going to carefully pick out some of the sharpest points on the armour with a small spot highlight. So we've got sharp points here. I'm just catching the very sharpest points with a fairly thin edge highlight of Dawn Yellow. This is going to bring out some of these sharpest points, make them stand out, and just add a little bit more definition to the model. You don't want to go too heavy with this highlight. It is quite bright. So I'm just picking out some of the sharpest points just to accentuate that shape of the model so it will stand out more on the battlefield from a distance. Apply a few small spot highlights of Dawn Yellow to some of the sharpest points on the model, and then you'll have a fantastic looking Imperial Guardsman ready to go to battle in the desert. And with that Dawn Yellow applied, you can see how it's really given us a great looking desert camo effect for this Imperial Guardsman. All that's left to do now is give him a fitting base, and he's ready to go off and fight the wars of the Imperium in a desert wasteland. So thank you very much for watching. Please let me know in the comments down below, are there any other camo patterns you would like to see me paint? Don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you would like, you can join me over on my Patreon where I have a free tier as I'm building up a nice little painting community. So thank you very much for watching and happy painting.